The woman who called me a burden for 10 years was smiling the day she walked into my lawyer's office. She thought she was there to hear good news. She had no idea. My attorney had been documenting every word she ever said about me, every insult, every whisper she thought I didn't hear. And that day, everything she said came back to her, not with anger, not with shouting, but with something far worse, proof. Before we go any further, I want to say thank you for being here. If this opening grabbed your attention, take a second to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I read every message. A quick note before we continue. This story blends imagination with themes that reflect situations many people face. Names and settings are crafted for storytelling, but the lessons behind them are meant to stay with you. Now, let me tell you why that meeting happened. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 74 years old, and for most of my life, I believed respect came naturally in a family. You raise your children, you support them, you sacrifice quietly, and in return, you expect at least a little dignity. Not praise, not recognition, just basic respect. For 40 years, I worked. Long hours, early mornings. Everything I earned went into this family. The house, their education, their comfort. Even after I retired, I kept helping where I could, because that's what I thought a father was supposed to do. But things changed. Slowly. At first, it was just tone. The way she spoke to me. Sharp, dismissive. Like I was in the way. Then it became words. Small at first. Easy to ignore. Until they weren't. Until they became a pattern. And the worst part? She only said them when she thought I wasn't listening. But I was. Every single time. And I wasn't the only one. Because a few years ago, I made a quiet decision. I told my attorney, keep records. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. And from that day on, nothing went unnoticed. Not a word. Not a look. Not the way she smiled in front of guests. And changed the moment the door closed. Her name was Linda, my son Michael's wife. For 10 years, she made sure I understood one thing. I was no longer welcome. Not directly. She was too careful for that. She preferred quieter methods. Comments disguised as jokes. Little remarks at dinner. A kind people pretend not to notice, because admitting it would make it real. The first time I truly saw it was Christmas. Margaret had been gone for only 8 months. It was my first holiday without her. The house felt wrong. Too quiet. Too cold. Michael insisted I come for dinner. Sighed I shouldn't be alone. I believed him. I even brought the old wooden music box Margaret loved, the one that played her favorite song. I thought maybe keeping traditions alive would make things feel normal. Dinner was polite. Too polite. The kind of silence that tells you people are being careful. Linda smiled often, but never at me. After dessert, I stepped into the kitchen for water. That's when I heard her. She was in the hallway talking to Michael. Her voice low, sharp. He needs to stop coming like this. A pause. Then, it feels like we're raising another child. I stood there holding that glass so tightly, I thought it might break. Michael said nothing. That part hurt more. Silence can be louder than words. Linda continued. He just sits there, looking sad. It ruins everything. Still, Michael said nothing. I walked back into the dining room, sat down, smiled when I had to, and left early. No scene, no confrontation, just silence. Because grief teaches you strange things. One of them is this: sometimes the people who should protect your dignity won't. That Christmas should have been enough. It should have told me everything. But when you love your family, you become an expert at making excuses for them. I told myself she was stressed, that Michael would talk to her later, that things would improve. They didn't. Thanksgiving came, then birthdays, then ordinary Sundays, and every time, another comment, another reminder, another quiet humiliation, always just small enough to deny, always just painful enough to remember. And through all of it, I stayed quiet, not because I was weak, because I was watching. And so was Frank, my lawyer. Every visit, every incident, every witness, every insult carefully written down, because patience can look a lot like surrender until the day it becomes evidence. Frank never liked Linda. He never said it directly. Lawyers are careful with words. But every time I mentioned her, his silence said enough. We had known each other for 23 years. Long enough for him to understand the things I didn't say. One afternoon, after another uncomfortable Sunday dinner, I stopped by his office. I wasn't angry, just tired, the kind of tired that settles in your bones. He poured me coffee, sat across from me, and asked only one question. How much longer are you planning to tolerate this? I looked at him for a moment, because the truth was, I didn't know. When Margaret was alive, I said, this house felt like home. I paused. Now I feel like a guest asking permission to exist. Frank nodded slowly. No sympathy, just understanding. That feeling doesn't fix itself, he said. I know. He leaned forward, then stopped waiting for them to change. Simple words, but they stayed with me because I had been waiting for Michael to notice, waiting for Linda to soften, waiting for respect to return on its own. It never did. That day, I made my first real decision. Not emotional, practical. I asked Frank to review everything. My will, the house, the savings, the investments, everything. He opened a folder, quietly prepared like he had expected this conversation years ago. Your current estate is valued at just over $2.4 million, he said. I nodded, not because the number mattered, but because I knew what it represented. 40 years of sacrifice. Every early morning, every missed vacation, every overtime shift, every promise I made to my family, kept. And now I had to decide what those years would mean in the end. Frank looked at me carefully. Do you want Michael protected from Linda? That question hit harder than I expected, because Michael was still my son, even in silence, even in disappointment. Yes, I said, but not at the cost of rewarding disrespect. Frank nodded. That was the moment the plan began. Slowly, carefully, legally. Nothing dramatic. No revenge speeches. Just structure, records, protection, consequences. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. I was making sure my life's work didn't end up in the hands of someone who had spent 10 years treating me like a burden. And if that truth hurt, it should, because dignity matters, even late in life. Especially late in life. Before I left, Frank closed the folder and said, when the time comes, she thinks she's walking in to collect a reward. He adjusted his glasses. But she'd be walking into a lesson instead. And for the first time in years, I smiled. After that, I stopped explaining myself. I stopped trying to earn comfort in places that should have offered it freely. Something changes in a man when he accepts the truth. Not bitterness, clarity. I still visited Michael's house, still showed up for birthdays, still brought gifts for the grandchildren, because they were innocent in all of this, and because love doesn't disappear just because respect does. But I watched differently. I listened differently. And once you stop lying to yourself, you notice everything. Like the way Linda only smiled when money was mentioned. The way she suddenly became warm whenever repairs were needed. Or when tuition bills arrived. Or when Michael mentioned retirement plans. Then suddenly, I was family again. Useful people usually are. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting on their back porch while the kids played in the yard. Michael had gone inside. Linda sat across from me with a glass of wine. Too relaxed. Too confident. She looked at my old truck parked near the fence and laughed softly. "You know," she said, "I still can't believe you refused to replace that thing." I smiled slightly. "It still runs." She shrugged. "Some things keep running along after they should." She took another sip, then added, "Honestly, Harold, sometimes I think you enjoy making people feel responsible for you." There it was. Clean, direct, no disguise this time. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt finished. "I never asked anyone to carry me," I said calmly. She smirked. "No, you just make everyone feel guilty enough to do it." I nodded slowly, because suddenly everything was simple. 10 years of comments. 10 years of disrespect. And there she was, saying it plainly. Like she had finally stopped pretending. Michael came back outside just then. She smiled instantly. Different face. Different woman. He noticed nothing. Again, that night, I called Frank. I didn't waste words. "It's time," I said. He was quiet for a second. Then, "Are you certain?" "Yes." No hesitation. Because certainty doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives on a porch, in the shape of a sentence you can never forget. Frank exhaled. "All right," he said. Then we moved forward, and just like that, the final chapter began. Linda still believed she was slowly pushing me out. She had no idea. She was walking herself straight into the consequences. A week later, Frank called. Thursday, 2 o'clock. That was all he said. He didn't need to explain. We both knew what it meant. The meeting was ready. The documents were prepared. Everything signed. Everything final. Now all that was left was for them to hear it. Frank contacted Michael first. "Formal, professional. Mr. Bennett would like you and your wife at my office. It concerns his estate." That sentence works like magic on people, especially people expecting something. Michael called me that evening. "Dad, is everything okay?" His voice carried concern, but I had learned to hear the difference between worry and curiosity. "I'm fine," I said. "Then what's this about?" "You'll find out Thursday." A pause. Then, "All right?" Linda didn't call, but I heard she had questions. Plenty of them. That didn't surprise me. She liked control, and uncertainty made people like her nervous. Thursday arrived quietly. I wore Margaret's favorite watch, the silver one she bought me for our 25th anniversary. Not for luck, for perspective, because she would have understood this better than anyone. She believed kindness mattered, but she also believed boundaries did. By 1:30, I was sitting in Frank's office. Same leather chair. Same heavy silence. He placed the folder on the desk between us. Thick, neat, years of my life reduced to paper and signatures. "You're still certain?" he asked. I looked at the folder, then at him. "She spent 10 years teaching me exactly where I stood." I said calmly, "I'm just returning the lesson." He nodded. No judgment, just respect. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door opened. Michael walked in first, Linda beside him, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, and smiling. That smile told me everything. She thought this was Inheritance Day. She thought she had already won. "Harold," she said warmly. Too warmly. We were so worried. I almost admired the performance. Almost. Michael sat down across from me, Linda beside him, close enough to touch the future she believed was hers. Frank adjusted his glasses, professional as ever. "Thank you for coming," he said. "This meeting concerns Mr. Bennett's final estate arrangements." Linda crossed her legs, relaxed, confident. "Ready?" Frank opened the folder. And in that moment, I realized something strange. I wasn't nervous, not even a little, because peace comes when you stop protecting people from the consequences of their choices. Frank turned the first page and began to read. That was the moment Linda's smile started to disappear. Frank's voice was calm, steady, professional. The estate, valued at approximately $2.4 million. Linda straightened slightly. Michael leaned forward, both listening carefully now. "Has been restructured according to Mr. Bennett's final instructions." That word, restructured, changed the room. Linda's smile faded just a little. Frank continued, "The family home will not be transferred to Michael Bennett or his spouse." Silence. Instant. Sharp. Instead, it would be placed in a trust for the grandchildren, protected until they reached adulthood. Michael blinked, confused. Linda sat up straighter. Frank kept reading. "A portion of the estate will go to several veteran support programs and a local cancer foundation in memory of Margaret Bennett." I watched Linda's face carefully. Confusion turning into concern. Concern turning into disbelief. "And the remaining assets," Frank said, "will remain under private management, with no direct control granted to Linda Bennett." There it was. Her name. Clear, specific, final. Linda finally spoke. "I'm sorry. What exactly does that mean?" Frank looked at the document, then answered without emotion. "It means you inherit nothing." The room went still. Michael turned toward her, then back to Frank. "There has to be some mistake." "There is no mistake," Frank replied. "Everything signed, everything witnessed, everything legal." Linda let out a short laugh, the kind people make when reality feels too absurd to accept. "This is ridiculous," she said. She looked at me. "You can't be serious." I met her eyes. For the first time in years, without hesitation. "I'm completely serious." Her voice sharpened. "After everything we've done for you?" That almost made me smile. Because finally, she had said it honestly. Not love, not family, transaction. I leaned forward slightly. "Do you mean the dinners where I was tolerated?" Silence. "The holidays where I was treated like furniture?" Michael looked down. Linda said nothing. "The comments you thought I couldn't hear?" Now her face changed. Because she understood. Not suspicion. Knowledge. She knew. I continued calmly. "You called me a burden." No denial. "You said I was taking up space." Still nothing. "You said it so often. I imagine you forgot." Linda's voice dropped. "Harold." But I raised my hand. Not angry. Just finished. No, for 10 years I stayed quiet. Not because I was weak, because I was paying attention. Frank slid a second folder across the desk. Thin, but heavy. Records. Dates. Witnesses. Details. Every insult. Every moment. Every word carefully remembered. Linda stared at it like it might burn her. Because sometimes proof is louder than any argument. Linda didn't touch the folder. She just stared at it, like if she ignored it long enough, it might disappear. Michael looked between us, confused, then slowly, ashamed. "Is this true?" he asked her. His voice was quiet. That made it worse. Because anger can be defended. Disappointment cannot. Linda crossed her arms. Defensive, no. This is ridiculous, she said. People say things. Families argue. That doesn't mean. It means exactly what it means, I said. Calm, clear. She turned to me. So this is revenge? I shook my head. No, revenge is emotional. This is responsibility. Michael rubbed his forehead, trying to process 10 years in 10 seconds. You never told me, he said. That one was for me, not her. I looked at my son. No, I said. I kept waiting for you to notice. That landed harder than anything else. Because deep down, he knew I was right. The silence between us said enough. There were moments in life when words stopped helping. This was one of them. Linda finally opened the folder. Page after page. Dates, Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays, even ordinary Sundays. Every cruel sentence she thought had vanished into the air, sitting there in black and white. I watched her confidence disappear line by line. This is insane, she whispered. No, Frank said quietly. It's documentation. Michael leaned back in his chair, like the room had become too small. I should have seen this, he said. I nodded once. Yes, not to hurt him, to tell the truth, because truth delayed is still truth. Linda looked at me again, but the arrogance was gone now. Only fear. What do you want from me? She asked. I thought about that, really thought about it, then answered honestly. Nothing. That surprised her, because people like Linda understand transactions, not dignity. I don't need your apology, I said. I needed your respect. 10 years ago, silence. Heavy, unavoidable. Michael's eyes were wet now. Small things revealed big truths. That was one of them. Dad, he started, but I stopped him gently. This isn't about punishment. It's about consequences. I stood up slowly. Not dramatic. Just done. I spent too many years trying to be accepted in a place that should have been home. I looked at both of them. I won't spend the rest of my life doing the same. Frank closed the folder. The sound felt final, because it was. And as I walked toward the door, I heard Linda say the one thing I had waited years to hear. I'm sorry. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. For a moment, I stood there with my hand on the door, listening, not because I needed the apology, but because I wanted to know if it was real. Some apologies are for healing. Others are only for saving what's left. I had learned the difference. Behind me, Linda's voice was shaking. I was angry, she said. I was stressed. I said things I shouldn't have. Silence. Then, I didn't think he heard me. That line told me everything. Not regret for the words. Regret for being caught. I closed my eyes for a second, and finally turned around. Michael was sitting there, broken in a way I had never seen before. Linda looked smaller now. Not because she had changed, but because truth removes the performance. I walked back slowly, looked at her, and said the only honest thing left. The problem was never that I heard you. I paused. The problem was that you meant it. No one spoke, because there was nothing to defend. I turned to Michael, my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man who sat silent while his father was slowly erased from his own family. That hurt more than Linda ever could. You were supposed to protect this family, I said quietly, not watch it happen. His eyes filled. I know. 3 simple words. Too late, but real. And sometimes, real matters, even when it arrives late. I nodded slowly, because forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. People confuse them all the time. I can forgive you, I said. But forgiveness doesn't rebuild what neglect destroys. He looked down, because he understood. Finally, Linda whispered, "What happens now?" I gave a small, tired smile. "Now? You live with it. No anger. No revenge. Just truth. Because consequences are quiet. They don't shout. They stay." I picked up my coat. Frank walked with me to the door. Before I left, I looked back one last time. At the office. At my son. At the woman who spent 10 years making me feel like a burden. And I realized something important. Peace doesn't come when people finally apologize. It comes when you stop needing them to. So I walked out, not as a man who had won, but as a man who had finally stopped losing. A week later, I had 32 missed calls. Most from Michael. A few from Linda. One voicemail after another. Apologies. Promises. Requests to talk. I listened to only one. Michael's voice sounded different. Smaller. "Dad, I know I failed you. I should have seen it. I should have said something. I just thought there would always be more time." I replayed that message twice. Not because I needed to, but because regret sounds different when it's real. Linda sent a text. Just one sentence. "I was wrong. I know that now. No excuses. No performance. Just words. Maybe sincere. Maybe not." At that point, it no longer mattered. Because healing doesn't begin with their apology. It begins with your boundary. I didn't call back immediately. Not out of pride. Out of peace. For the first time in years, my silence belonged to me. A few days later, I went to visit Margaret's grave. Fresh flowers. Same quiet place. I stood there longer than usual, and I told her everything. About the meeting. About Michael. About finally choosing dignity over comfort. The wind was cold, but somehow I felt lighter. Like she already knew. Like she had been waiting for me to stop confusing patience with self-betrayal. Before I left, I said something out loud. Something simple. I should have done it sooner, and for the first time, I believed it. That evening, my grandson Ethan stopped by. No warning. Just showed up with coffee, and that awkward smile young men use when they care but don't know how to say it. "Grandpa," he said, handing me the cup. I heard things got intense. I smiled. That's one way to describe it. We sat on the porch for an hour, talking about work, life, nothing dramatic. And somehow, that meant everything. Because real love rarely arrives with speeches. It shows up. It stays. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, "You know, I'm proud of you." I laughed softly. At 74, I didn't expect that sentence to matter. But it did, more than I admitted. That night, I turned my phone off. Not forever, just long enough to enjoy the silence. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance you leave behind is teaching people that love without respect is not love at all. And if they learn that too late, that isn't cruelty. That's life. I was never a burden. I was just surrounded by people who forgot my worth. Now, they remember. And this time, they'll never forget.